Right, in today's lesson, we are going to focus on sequence of tenses, which is the thing that we do just after learning English tenses. In order to learn sequence of tenses, first of all, we need to know what is a clause, how many types of clauses are there, and how do you identify the clauses? How do you identify whether it's the main clause or it's the subordinate clause? That's what we should do first. Let's take a look at what's a clause. In a language, a clause is a part of a sentence that contains a verb. A typical clause consists of a subject and a predicate. The latter typically a verb phrase, a verb with any objects and other modifiers. So in here you can see that a clause is just like a sentence. It will contain a subject, it will contain a verb, and it will have an object in most of the cases, and it may have a verb phrase as well, and it may have objects that may work as modifiers. So in simpler words, if I put it, it will be a sentence that makes part of a longer sentence. Like it is a sentence that will make another sentence a longer sentence. It will help elaborate ideas into longer sentences. That's what is a clause. In a clause, you will have three things of a basic sentence, that is a subject, a verb, and an object. Clauses basically are of two types. One is main clause and the other one is subordinate clause. Now main clause has other names such as principal clause, independent clause, and subordinate clause is also known as dependent clause. We will stick with the last names, that's independent clause and dependent clause. Let's take a look at these four examples that I have here. I went to see my father while it was raining very heavily. Second one is I didn't know your address because I forgot to ask you yesterday. Third one is she said that she would pass the exam in flying colors. And fourth sentence is I know the man who came to see your father last month. Now you see, in order for any clause to become an independent clause, as the name suggests, it has to give you a vivid, a clear idea, and it does not have to depend on the other clause. For example, if I govern example number 1, that's I went to see my father while it was raining very heavily. This sentence has two clauses. One is I went to see my father, that's one clause. While it was raining very heavily, that's another clause. Now if you read these two clauses separately, like I went to see my father first, and then if you read while it was raining very heavily, you can get an idea of which one is independent clause and which one is dependent. If we read the first portion, that's I went to see my father, it gives you clear idea that you made the initiative and you went somewhere and you saw your father. Gives you a complete idea. But if you read the other portion, while it was raining very heavily, it seems like it's a part of another sentence, and it itself does not give you a clear idea. Hence this portion, while it was raining heavily, is your subordinate clause. Similarly, in example number 2, I didn't know your address, gives you full idea if you read this portion. Because I forgot to ask you yesterday, this seems like a part of another sentence which does not give you a full idea. Third sentence, if you take a look at, she said, this is just one sentence, that she would pass the exam in flying colors, seems like a part of another sentence. Sometimes you may be confused at sentences like these by looking at that, but that here, the word that is a conjunction here. It's working like a conjunction. It has joined two sentences, so you have to add that when you read the sentence. That she would pass the exam in flying colors is another clause. In this sentence, she said is the principal clause, and that she would pass the exam in flying colors is your subordinate clause. Similarly, in example number 2, if I mark it, the subordinate would be because I forgot to ask you yesterday. Example number 4 is I know the man. One clause, who came to see your father last month. Another clause. If you read them separately, I know the man gives you full idea. Who came to see your father last month, if you just read this portion, it does not give you a full idea, hence it is a dependent clause. Here my discussion of clauses end. You just need to know what is a clause, which we have already discussed. Then the types of clauses and how to identify them. In order for any clause to become independent, it has to give you a full meaning. In order for any clause to become dependent, it will never give you a full meaning. It will always rely on the other clause, as seen in these 4 examples. Okay, now let's take a look at what's sequence of tenses. That's the topic, and that's what we need to know. Sequence of tenses are the principles which govern the tense of the verb in subordinate clause. Vice versa, the tense of the verb in the principal clause. It means sequence of tenses are actually rules that tell you what should be the tense of the clauses in principal as well as in subordinate. What should be the tense? If your principal clause, say, is in past tense, should the subordinate clause be also in past tense? Are there any rules regarding that? That's what you need to know. Now here I have 4 rules for you of sequence of tenses. Let's quickly look at rule number 1. If the principal clause is in the past tense, past here means any past tense of the 4 available, the subordinate clause should also be in the past tense. If your principal clause is already in the past tense, then the subordinate should also be in the past tense. That's the sequence of tenses rule number 1. For example, 5 examples have been given here. My father assured me, that's one clause, that he would buy a bike for me. That's another clause. You can see the first clause, my father assured me, it's in simple past tense. Hence, the second clause, that he would buy a bike for me, is also in past tense. How do you know that's in past tense? Because will's past form is given, that's would. So you cannot say my father assured me that he will buy a bike for me. You cannot write that. If you write that, it will be wrong, because your principal clause is in past tense, and hence the subordinate would also follow the past tense. Second example, he failed. This is just one clause. That's your principal clause. Then the reasoning. Because he did not work hard. You cannot write here because he does not work hard or he cannot work hard. You cannot write. Even if you want to write them, you need to write them in the past structure. He failed because he did not work hard. You cannot write in the past structure because the principal clause follows the past structure. Hence, the subordinate must follow the past structure. Example number C, he asked me, one clause, what she was reading. You can see first is in past, so second clause was also put in past tense. D, if you look at, I thought that I could win the race. I thought, one clause, that I could win the race. It's another clause. First one is in past tense, second also followed the past tense. It cannot be can win the race. Ram said that he would come Monday. So you can see Ram said is in past tense, and again will's past form has been used here, that is would come on Monday. So rule number 1 says if the principal clause is in past tense, the subordinate clause should also be in the past tense. Now how will you get a sentence in the examination? In the examination, from example A, I will show you, my father assured me that, and in place of would, here they will give you will. And in the answer you would write, my father assured me that he would buy a bike for me. In the second example, in this one, in place of did not, they will give not work hard. So you have to write did not work hard or hadn't worked hard. In example 3, it will be in place of was, they may just give you be verb, so you have to use a past auxiliary here, or they may completely give you she, then read. So you can write had been reading or she was reading, both will be in its correct structure. and D will also be given like this. Can will be in the brackets, and you have, when you see the sentence, you see the first clause that's in past tense, so you will follow the other clause in past tense as well. And in this one, would be given as will in the exam, and that's how the sentences will look like in the exam, and you know the answers already. Since we've done rule number 1, let's go to rule number 2 now. Rule number 2 is the opposite of rule number 1, but there is a catch which you need to understand. A past tense in the principal clause may be followed by a present tense in the subordinate clause when the subordinate clause expresses a universal truth, mathematical calculation, historical fact, moral guidelines, habitual fact, or something that has not changed yet. In such cases, the tense of the subordinate does not change even if the principal clause is in the past tense. So if I put this rule in simple tense, in a simple manner, it will be like this. If your subordinate clause, that means the dependent clause, expresses a universal truth. We have done universal truth while doing simple present tense. If it expresses a mathematical calculation, you would come to know what is a mathematical calculation in the examples, or a historical fact, or moral guidelines. Moral guidelines should be how you should behave in a society, or habitual fact, the things that you do on a regular basis, or something that has not changed yet, things which are still progressing, still happening. If your subordinate clause expresses any of these, then even if your principal clause is in past tense, the subordinate clause's tense will not change, and the subordinate clause will take simple present tense, even if your principal clause is in past tense, only if they express any of these, from universal truth to something that hasn't changed yet. Let's look at examples so that we can understand it better. We have 7 examples here. He said that the earth revolves around the sun. So in here you can see he said one clause, that the earth revolves around the sun. This is a universal truth, hence the tense will always be in simple present tense. It will not follow the principal clause. But you can see in this example, principal clause is in past tense. Example B, we learnt at school that truth always triumphs. And this one also you can see we learnt at school is in simple past tense. That the truth always triumphs. It's a moral guideline. It's a thing that we learn in a civil society. So the tense of that will not follow with the tense of the principal clause. Example C, he said that 2 and 2 is 4. That's a mathematical calculation. That's always true. So tense will not change. Simple present tense will be followed in the subordinate clauses. Krishna told in Gita that life is not victory but battle. This is a historical fact. Ram said that man is mortal, universal truth. I was happy to note that India is progressing. That is something that hasn't changed yet. Newton discovered that apple falls because of gravitational force of earth. That is a I would say a historical fact, or like a this is a historical fact. So in the exam, how will you get these sentences? I would just show you the first one. Revolve will be in the bracket. So when you read the sentence, you have to read the sentence first and judge, and remember this rule, because if that expresses any of these, from a universal truth to something that hasn't changed yet, to historical fact, to moral guidelines, to habitual fact, the tense will always be in simple present tense, even if your principal clause is in past tense. That's your rule number 2, and it's opposite to rule number 1. Okay, now let's take a look at rule number 3. If the subordinate clause is introduced by a conjunction of comparison, such as then or as well as, then a past tense in the principal clause may be followed by any tense in the subordinate clause as per the sense of the statement. Furthermore, any tense in the principal clause can be followed by any tense in the subordinate clause. It means if your subordinate clause, if your dependent clause is introduced with these clauses such as then or as well as, then the subordinate clause can take any tense out of the 12 tenses, and it depends entirely on the speaker how he should use it. Also, if these conjunctions are used, such as then and as well as, then the tense of the principal clause may also change into any tense. For example, he loved me more than he loved you. In this one, then is used. So, subordinate clauses tense can be put in any other tense. Let's see how. Example A, if I change it, he loved me more than he will love you, I can say. He loved me more than he is loving you, I can say. He loved me more than he was loving you, I can say. So it depends entirely on me, means the speaker, to change the tense according to the need of the statement, need of the situation. Also, I can change the tense of the first portion if these conjunctions are used, such as then and as well as. I can say he will love you more than he loved you, more than he is loving you, more than he had been loving you, like that. And certain things, similar things will follow with the other examples as well. I can say he loved me more than he loves you, he is loving you. If I take a look at example number G, she helps you as well as she helped me, as well as she has helped me, she had helped me, she is helping me, she has been helping me. I can put it in any tense according to the mood. So rule number 3 says, if your subordinate clause is introduced with then or as well as, then the tense of the subordinate clause can take any tense out of the 12, as well as the principal clause can take any tense. It means the speaker will have full liberty to use any tense he or she wants according to the situation. Last but not the least, let's take a look at rule number 4. A present or a future tense in the principal clause may be followed by any tense. So in here you can see, if your principal clause is in present or future tense, here present means any of the 4 tenses of the under the present tense, or any of the 4 tenses under the future tense, then the subordinate may be followed in any tense. Again, rule number 4 is just like rule number 3. It depends on you how you want to say it. But the catch is that the front portion, the beginning portion, will have to be in either simple present tense or in simple future tense, or in any future or present tense. For example, he says, this is in simple present tense. I can say he is saying, I can say he has said, I can say he has been saying. There is no problem because 4 of them will be in present tense. So he says that she passed the examination. Here you can see that she passed the examination is in simple past tense. I can use it in any other tense. He says that she will pass the examination. I can say he says that she is passing the examination. She will have passed the examination. She had been passing the examination. I can put it in any tense. Only if your principal clause is in present or future tense, the subordinate can be put in any tense. Example C. In example C, you can see that the principal clause is in future tense, specifically in simple future tense. Ram will say, that is one clause, simple future, that he likes that girl. So we can change the sentence. Ram will say that he is will not take ing. So he has liked that girl. He will like that girl. He will have liked that girl. Sentences like that can be put in any tense according to the demand of the situation and the demand of the speaker, how he wants to use these examples in a sentence. Now, what's more important for you in the examination are rule number 1 and 2. So these are the 2 rules where you need to focus more. Other than that, it's not like rule number 3 and rule number 4 is not important, but you need to look at them. You need to precisely understand them, and that's all about it. That's pretty much it for today's class. If you have any confusion, feel free to ask me.